Shirley here with Jupitalis, and Venus is in Gemini. I made a video for Venus conjuncting Sedna in Gemini. We have better light. And funnily enough, my phone was having a meltdown, which means that it's too hot. This is such a Mercury shade in Leo for the summer season because the heat can make it difficult for our technology. So I try to put it next to my ventilator for a while, so it will cool down. Yeah. Venus, so I talked about Venus conjoining Sedna and exposed some sensitive topics, and this is including tips for you to discern if somebody is involved with doing pedo ring related rituals. That doesn't mean they're running a pedo ring or are in a pedo ring, but it definitely means that if they go up the rank, they will be. So this is so important. And now let's talk about the other facets of just Venus being in Gemini. So Venus in Gemini, brighter lighter, is how I like to call that. That's that's the name of a famous album that I actually have karmic rope with. Oh, but okay. Venus will be going from the trine to the inconjunct with Pluto, from the sextile to the square with Saturn and Neptune, and from the conjunction with Uranus just onwards. So right now we are expected still a lot of upheavals, eurekas, epiphanies, liberation when it comes to our relations. This was the last Venus. We are off with the last Venuranus in Taurus, and now Uranus, well, the next time Venus is in Taurus, Uranus will already be in Gemini. So we are almost done with anything that Uranus has to say in Taurus, and now we have this harmonious several minutes of harmony before Venus goes into some quite impressive challenges between the end of Gemini to the beginning of Cancer. So Venus Gemini. Gemini is the sign of oppositions and polarities. It is a sign related to children, communication. It's an air sign. It is way more flirtatious and flamboyant, but it only gets serious when it is allowed to speak the truth. So, Kita Shabbos. And so, yeah, you can see the atmosphere. Jupiter is exalted again. So there is a lot of lightness to Venus in Gemini. We have to remember that Mercury is about compartmentalizing things, breaking something apart to understand its constituents, and Venus is about unifying. So those two don't usually easily get along, but we find a lot of people who are actually relationship coaches or relation-related skills, because Mercury is technology to break something into the components, to learn a skill, and even technology. People being infatuated with AI. The role of technology in connections. Yes, on a mundane level, we can see it perhaps in diplomatic connections, but on a Venusian personal level, is simply the role of technology in connections. So for the common people, that is the dating sites, the social media, but also with Mercury in Leo, how we introduce ourselves. More things to think about is that the sextile to Saturn and Neptune with the conjunction to Uranus, for some people they may have the chance to date, to find partners, or Venus also rules possessions, cars, and Mercury is trade. If you bought the car at this time, Mercury is retrograde. But other than that, it might be a purchase that would stand the test of time. So it might be connection that would stand the test of time. If it was separation, that might also be the case, okay? But if you have been like trying to say goodbye, that is actually can be facilitated. But for many people, it just means that if you made a certain dedication or commitment, it's very likely that it was coming from a more mature place, and very likely that it will stand the test of time. But that can also be very sudden, okay? Because Uranus. We know more about our values after Venus left Taurus and the conjunction with Uranus. So right now, things are actually way more, she's going to go through Sedna, but other than going through Sedna, we have kind of a time of grace when it comes to anything to do with connection. Also, when it comes to beauty, I noticed that the light returned. The light, because it is summer, so I have good lighting again, which was a problem with me making videos or showing my face and so on. And as we progress from here, we are going to be moving towards the first challenges. And the particular thing we will have at the end of this period, just kind of like a couple of weeks, in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to have the first real tests to the harmony that is present right now. So yes, with that harmony is Sedna, but also our resolutions, our values, our beauty practices, because Mercury rules skill and Venus rules beauty. Our connections and anything that we purchase that is of a Venusian, if it is artistic or somehow connected, or if it is a vehicle, all of that will have kind of like a karmic test in about 3 weeks time. So what are we building towards is actually the onset and release from the harmonious conjoining. And with Mercury, it's looking a bit different. Okay, what is harmonious can be perhaps we learned how to argue better. Perhaps we learned how to hold a dissonance, okay, in a benefic way, kind of Zen-like thinking is very Venus Mercury. Perhaps we learned how to negotiate better. Perhaps we learned to bring our stand and to express ourselves, and there is a visual aspect to this. Okay, there's a visual aspect to this. Perhaps we found our voice or found a way to present, okay, our arguments in a way that is actually heard. Okay, Venus in the sign of words is way more eloquent, and yet not necessarily having filter. Okay, so it's not Libra. We're not in Libra land. At the same time, we kind of need to refresh, to bring up those things, okay? To bring up those things that have been dredging, and to address the things that are of taboo nature around connections, but also around our beauty and around our glow and around our art. and around our connection to those. So we are building to a conflict. We are building to a conflict. We are building to a conflict with Saturn, Neptune in Aries. And I'm trying to envision what is that like in the coming weeks, because Mercury is going to go retrograde, Uranus will ingress Gemini, and I believe Uranus is co-present with Venus when it ingresses. So we're going to both see how Venus is with Uranus in Gemini. We've had since 2018 every season where Venus goes around Taurus, the chance to see what is Venus co-present with Uranus. And this is where you would get the rebellious Taurus, where usually Taurians are very, you know, they're like, they just stand their ground. They're not particularly anything other than like, they just stand the ground. If you disagree, fine. They just stand the ground. Okay, so Gemini is different, and Gemini is very argumentative, but not necessarily because it has a value that it's arguing for, but for the sake of learning the skill of argumentation. You think about children and how children reply to adults in ways that startle people. Okay, so this is the Gemini thing, and Venus is value, and Gemini is arguing for the sake of learning the skill of arguing. And so we're going to be doing that with values. So it's going to be the high season of debate, but then Uranus comes in. And I wonder what it's going to look like. It's going to be very chaotic. Because in Gemini, we usually play the devil's advocate. In Gemini, we usually do the debate classes. Okay? And the difference between debate to simulation of like Security Council or anything that is of a committee style is that debate is there is one opinion, then there is the counter opinion, and usually the people that have to represent those opinions have the opposite opinion. And that is usually how it is, okay? And so what does that look like with Uranus in the mix? So this is something that's going to add chaos to the system. What does Venus in Gemini look like when there is a almost civil war in the mix? How is that lightness and brightness and childlike, almost annoying childlike ability to argue for the worst opinion just so that they will be also heard, or for the sake of the skill of thinking, okay, what is the opposition thinking? What does that look like with Uranus? To be very honest, I don't know. And then Uranus will be with Sedna. And my prediction is that we're going to have a very hard time. And a couple of things I can think about. You think about the Saturn Neptune in Aries as it is time to take a stand. It is time to take a stand for sovereignty and all the things that have been an impediment of sovereignty. It's time to take a stand. It's time to act. And what we usually act on is our values, whether it is values or it is anti-values. So with Venus in Gemini, values is a game. Arguing for a certain value is a game. For example, what I began this with my previous video is, oh, these are the origins of the Madonna whore complex. It's actually a ritual that was done. This is so Gemini. This is, oh, there was this anthropological study of that faraway society that is actually Ivy League. And so, but Gemini is just this curious child. It's like, oh, that's what it's coming from. That's where it's coming from. Um, and and Saturn in Aries sign is so not joking about that. And at the same time, kind of like, oh, we need to fund our army. We need to fund our army. We need to expand. We need to prepare for war. We need to, that's the Madonna horror complex. The rites that they do. They began to train the military people. and I think that this is along the lines of the conflict that we are building up to. Is between, hey, Venus, what you're doing in Gemini, it's like we're trying to get something serious going on, and then Venus being flamboyant, but at about the square relations, she might, as she comes to ingress into Cancer, where she's also not suffering, okay, she might return to be value-y again. And so one of my jokes before the Venus ingress, you know, some of you know that I have been in astral circles that uncalled for astral circles with a lot of things to do with that. And one of my jokes about me was, she's a 10 but she has values. Because in those societies you're required not to. And so it's just by merit of me being an astrologer or whatever. Like I don't know. So so that kind of I think we're going to run into that again, but this time it's going to be, so for some cases it's going to be quite obvious. You know, all our military people, they're dating, they have family lives, they have you know, and we think about it like, she's a 10 but she has values. and that might become the source of the argument, because Venus in, let's say, Capricorn, she has another problem, which is like, oh, that is new money, that is not old money. And Venus in Taurus, she can have some traditional values. Venus in Gemini is like really unexpected. Like, we really don't know where she's gonna go with that. And she's building to have values, because at the end of Gemini, we have gone through the fumbling with and the elimination of the information that is unnecessary to make a decision. And by the end of Gemini, we kind of have a decision. So when it comes to Venus, she's going to have a value. And what that means, that the way she argues for her values is in conflict with what Saturn and Neptune is doing. So we don't know what will be. Okay, we don't know what will be. And then she's going to ingress into Cancer, and then we go from the square to the trine with the same Saturn and Neptune. So that is building to a certain helplessness situation of that Venus. And that helplessness situation is when she's not serious about it, or where she's just sifting and sorting, or where she just plays an air of mystery, or she's not necessarily playing an air of mystery. It's like allowing, let's just say, the mystery around what her actual opinion will be. Then she's kind of she kind of like can still be in sextile relations. She can still be in the trine with Pluto. But towards the end of Gemini, she decides. She takes a position. And so we don't know what her position will be, because she's in the beginning of Gemini. But we for sure know that whatever the position of Venus is going to be, and since it is Gemini, it's going to be different positions and different opinions for different Venuses. And all of them are going to be in square relation with the Saturn-Neptune. So we have to ask ourselves, what is Saturn-Neptune doing in Aries, and how is the transition of the Venus square co-present with Uranus already and in conjunct Pluto? How is that? But what she's going to sextile is Chiron and Aries in Aries. And this is where she can get her support. So we don't know what it's going to look like, okay? And we also understand that this is just a transient thing, because later she will go from the square to the trine. So in the square between Saturn, Venus, Neptune, Venus, okay, with Mars, and Mercury going back and forth to its shade period, it seems like whatever the result of this conflict, Venus will reevaluate things, because Mercury is still not left the shade period when Venus ingresses into Cancer. And then she's going to conjoin Jupiter, and it's going to separate from the square with the Saturn-Neptune. And so we are building to a conflict, but this conflict is very transient, and yet it serves as a karmic test to the current harmony and the current decisions, commitments, and alliances that are now present in the sky. It's kind of like it's the first karmic test. Now, usually within the seed of the sextile, the conflict seeds are planted, and within the seed of conflict, the trine, the harmony, is planted. Okay, it's kind of like a dance between conflicts and resolutions, where within the harmony that exists right now, and for every person is going to be different. Okay, within the harmony that exists right now, there is already that thing which is the little bit of unease, the little bit of, hey, but what about that? Or we are willing to give it, for example, right now, we are willing to give it time. With the Saturn, it can be, oh, we're no longer willing to give it time, or there's going to be a falling out of grace, okay? Or Venus will feel that she is not valued, okay? And Venus will feel... Now, this is a thing, because let's say that the topic of, let's say, working ladies or working boys is there. And with Gemini, the Venus is willing to play with trade. And so whether she's going to... For many people, this is exactly what it stands, because for many people... for some people, the Gemini has a fascinating, because it breaks things apart. For example, the Gemini is where we expect, if we were, let's say, sensual in Taurus, we expect to be loved in a way that is not just sensual. Or what if, so it's kind of like, what if I'm not as pretty? What if I am as pretty? What if this? What if that? The Gemini plays with all these options. And so when it comes to the trade question, at the end of the road, anyway, Venus will feel that there's something missing, Neptune. So whether it is the working lady that says, hey, I'm not valued for the value that I provide. If you remember, the sex work is work. I'm supposed to be well paid, which opens the door to Uranus to talk about, well, did you fight for your labor rights when you were a waitress, and so on. And for others, it's going to be, hey, I didn't want to go into the sex trade, and therefore I'm not valued. I didn't want to go into the sex trade, and therefore I'm not valued as a woman because I do not contend with the ritual abuse that is happening there. So, and that is, oh, because I don't want to be trafficked, I don't get job opportunities, or something to do with trade, okay? And so, because I did not comply with human trafficking, I'm sorry, I did not help to kidnap your child and rape it and torture it in a satanic ritual, so you mean I can't really participate in trade? That's very interesting. Now, on the other hand, we do trade children. Okay, so anyway, Venus is going to feel devalued towards the end of this conversation, towards the end of Venus being in Gemini. But this is a passing trend because within it, there is the seed of, even if you saw my example, even if within that is kind of like, oh, but anyway, we are trading children, so the entire trade needs to change, and then we are building to the trine with Saturn and Neptune, which is like, oh, mothering, caregiving, Venus being mother. Okay, because this is Cancer, so Venus being mother, whether it's mother of a business or it's mother of actual mother, but this is the seed of the conflict already brings the working towards the resolution. Or for some ladies, it's going to be, or some man that's working, or whichever the gender, it's going to be like, wait, I bring value to the table, even if, I don't know, people working in erotic industry or something like that, because Neptune is erotics. Neptune is espionage, but also sexpionage. Saturn is debt. Mars rules military. And so some of these people say, hey, what about my fair share? What about my money? What about my this? What about my that? And that might lead to a feeling that's like, oh, I'm being devalued here. And then the resolution begins to be about and by the way, this is a trajectory of a lot of people going out of the sex trade. They're like, hey, I should be charging more for this. I should value myself more. I should value my time, Saturn, more. I should this. I should that. I talked about the little Kim chart. And what about my orgasm? What about my water, which is the next sign? It's Cancer. And this is kind of like the threshold for many to say, well, since I do value myself, and I do care about my orgasms, and I do care about this, and I do care about that, something in this job, even with the improved conditions, does not allow me to be sensual, to be what about me? And by the way, it's not just like trafficking. I had colleagues that worked for sex positive tantra teaching and so on, and they were like, Shirley, I am working from 8 in the morning to 10 p.m. I teach women. I don't know how many people, women, men, begin to orgasm for the first time because of my teaching. I don't remember when was the last time I self-pleasured. And so all of these are options, this is an actual conversation I had with a colleague. Okay? They had a lot of Capricorn placements, and Capricorn is kind of like the corporate job, being very successful, climbing up the ladder, and they said, okay, now they're going to do that, but with a business which is positive and giving value to others. And then they were like, but what about me? Okay, I run the show, but where is my chance to orgasm? Okay, when do I have a time for having actual good sex? So you see, we are building towards this conflict by trying different things. Does that work for me? Does that work for me? Taking something apart to its components. And as Venus begins to do that, she begins to be in the first karmic test of whatever commitment or decision was taken upon the ingress. And there's going to be, with the sextile, there's going to be a certain decision. There's going to be a certain, hey, let's try that. Hey, let's give that some time. And that can be relations. That can be artistic endeavors. That can be collaborations. Okay, because Venus is art and Gemini is something of two. So she can say, okay, let's try this, let's try that, let's try working from this point, from that point, and then as we try, we reach to this culmination point. But it's going to be an ouchie, because Venus will then be experiencing feeling devalued, or because this is Neptune, okay, ideation and devaluation. Now, if everybody had the best of intentions, it's very likely be about Venus having an epiphany that, oh, I need that, or what was missing, or what was missing in my orgasm? A hug. This is Saturn. This is Saturn. This is Cancer. Okay. What was missing in my beauty procedures? A hug. Okay. To glow. And yeah, turn up 20 battery. This is looking like a movie, and my face is too bright. Anyway, it's dark, but it's not sweat, it's that thing that I put on my face, the lipstick. It's a lip gloss. I tried the makeup with the lip gloss, and now it just looks funny. It's luminous, but in a funny way. It's luminous, but in a funny way, which is also Venus Gemini. Okay. It's technology, but also the mishaps and the humor around the fact that I'm glowing in the dark right now. I'm radiant. I'm glowing in the dark. So even with the best intentions, we're going to have that experience. But Venus will be supported by the sextile to Chiron. So we are building from not really having an important, only having a minor aspect with Chiron and Aries, into having a lovely supportive sextile with Chiron and Aries. So this is where we are coming from chaos, from the chaos of Uranus, into another chaos, which is the chaos of Aries. So so one thing for sure, we're going from one type of chaos to another type of chaos, but we are also coming from tremendous harmony with Pluto and Saturn Neptune to a disorienting square and inconjunct. Meanwhile, Mercury is going to be retrograde. So the good, the bad, and the complicated, because there's nothing more situationship than Venus Gemini, all of that will need to be revised. All of that will need to be revised as Mercury goes through the retrograde, because we're going to have the Mercury retrograde at this time, and back across its shade period. So all of it basically means that we are having the most Gemini of conversations, because even when there is a resolution or there is a harmony and there is a conflict, even then we'll still have to look at it again. And the fact that Pluto is retrograde, Neptune has turned retrograde. I need to look at the chart and do another video. So this is also how the technology changes the presentation. And now I just look like one of those experimental films where there is this this anti-thunder, this anti-thunder, yeah, this anti-thunder light. But my phone is not in a meltdown anymore, and before the screen turns completely black, I will leave it as Venus in Gemini, and I will do another video about Neptune.